Hi, Dave Sobel here with another bonus episode of the Business of Tech, reporting from the floor of GTIA's ChannelCon 2025. I'm joined by Mike Psenka. He is the CEO of Moovila and a frequent flyer on the Business of Tech. Welcome back.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me, Dave. Appreciate it.
Now, I was excited to have you because one of the things that I've always appreciated about our conversations is you dig deep into the tech, particularly as it relates to the AI models and what they're capable of. We had a whole discussion last time you were on about that, and you've been digging into some of the areas where these models are starting to fall down a little bit with some real specific insights into where the mistakes are. Give me a little bit of a sense for the audience of like, hey, what are you starting to focus on as saying like these are areas that we need to be a little worried about?
Yeah, and I'd say maybe as much worried as, I guess, stepping back, I think the purveyors of the large foundational models, I think, and I'll say this and we continue to see this, there's no downside for the hype cycle for them, right? There's zero penalty. I don't know many industries where you can just sort of go, oh yeah, it's gonna be able to
It'll all get better.
Yes, and it's gonna be amazing, and Gen AI is coming out next month, and it's coming out next month, and it's coming, and they can just say that because it is impressive. I mean, you have to look at what these things have done and what they're capable of doing in a short period of time. And so I think as humans, we develop these biases around it and we go, oh my God, if it can do this, clearly it can do this and this. My God, it must be able to do this if it could do this. It, just won a gold medal at the international math competition, right? Some humans did beat it and score higher, but the major foundational models did that in these abstract novel questions. So when you look at that, it sort of leads us with this bias to believe they can do anything, and they can't, right? Because they are built with a very specific architecture, a very specific process, these attention transformers and the matrix math multiplication that occurs. And so the linear probabilistic nature of their execution, that sort of kind of defines how that engine works, right? And so we have to understand that it's not going to be great at everything. And there are some things, I wouldn't say that it's falling down, it's just kind of never gotten up. It's gotten, the models, the initial papers came out in the late teens, and then over time, like they did some neat things, but the error rate, I mean, at the end of the day, you sort of think about it in terms of error rate, right? And the error rate was just too high for us to be impressed, right? But the error rate dropped to a point when you were asking questions or going through a process, and in 2D, 3D vision, we saw that error rate just kind of drop significantly. And they got better and better to a point where you went, my God, this is really, really cool. But there are certain areas where the error rate kind of hasn't dropped, and they're sort of at unacceptably high levels, and we just haven't seen the needle move. One of those areas is around something called graph data, right? So graph data is, graph in discrete math terms is you have vertices and edges, right? And so they're kind of connected dots. If you're driving instructions, your edges are going to be the roads, the vertex are going to be the corners you're turning on. Putting that relative to MSPs, it would be a project plan, right? Okay. So a task, and you have dependencies and durations are kind of the edges of the task is the vertex, and they get built out into a nested structure, and their projects, their phases, and their dependencies. Well, it turns out these large foundational models are really not good at interrogating those, understanding, and analyzing them. It can sort of look to its nearest neighbor, but it can't traverse those graphs. You have to use more deterministic AI technologies and processes to sort of traverse those graphs to really understand accurately. And once again, if you have an error rate at all, the really bad thing about sort of trusting it to, quote unquote, on its own, hey, I'm going to upload a project plan and trust ChatGPT to manage that, is if it gets one of those nodes wrong, it'll contaminate the entire graph. So articles coming out recently is this year with Harvard and Amazon and Michigan State and Microsoft, obviously two organizations very motivated around these models saying, hey, they're not doing a good job. And I think, you and I talked before, that article that came out from Apple, right, is chain of thought reasoning. It just shows that, hey, we're not seeing this drop off in error rate. And a big part of that is fundamentally, how are these things built? Are they built for that? Like, is it going to get better? Yeah, it's going to get better over time for sure. But we didn't see it get better like 2D, 3D vision got better. We didn't see it get better the way we saw other things that they do well today get better. So that's the question, is like, humans aren't going to get replaced immediately.
Right.
So I think what that's towards,
let's try and bucket that a little bit, particularly because you're thinking about that. What are the kinds of use cases that you need to be really careful about not using, particularly the generative AI technologies and the large language models around? What do those use cases fall into? Yeah,
so once again, thinking of that term generative, so if it's going to create something, it is really good at that. You could even say, create a project plan around this, and it can do that in a linear probabilistic fashion. Okay. But the minute you say evaluate this, analyze it living in state that's complex, that's where it breaks down. That's where it breaks down, and it can hallucinate, and that's where it becomes an issue. And people saw some of this, right? When they said, hey, you forgot what I just told you, or I'm asking you this question, and you seem to forget what I said 2 times ago in the context window. It's sort of a kind of a bigger version of that. And so once again, if you're thinking about giving it something complex that has nested dependencies or is a larger framework of data, you can't really trust it to analyze a complex framework or relationship well, right? And that can be risky. And once again, that comes to this idea of complex work, structured work, as opposed to a one-off, hey, I've got to do this atomic task. Really good at those atomic tasks because it can consider that wholly. But I guess maybe the word relationship I would use. If there's nested relationships, it sort of falls down on that.
Are your customers getting the most from their Microsoft 365 Business Premium subscriptions? Are you delivering maximum value while ensuring best-in-class margins? Nerdio's new modern work features let you streamline the management of Microsoft technologies like Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows 365, Intune, and Defender. Reduce the need for multiple tools, consolidate your vendor stack, and deliver greater value to your customers. Help your customers maximize their investments, free up your team for strategic tasks, and drive meaningful business outcomes. With Nerdio Manager for MSP, a single, flexible platform with mix and match plans ensures a flexible, perfect fit for you and your customers. Deliver solutions that achieve real business impact. Visit getnerdio.com to find out more.
It feels like this is the area where you'd have some opinions on the agentic AI trend. Everyone's slapping agentic AI on top of this. By what you've just said, I can almost immediately say, well, it feels like there's 2 types. Small, discrete tasks, probably pretty good at. Anything complicated, probably not so much. How are you looking at the agentic AI trend and evaluating that broadly?
Yeah. So hybrid is going to be the way it has to be for something large and complex, right? And so once again, a lot of hype cycle around agentic AI, and all vendors have to be sort of talking about that narrative in some way, shape, or form. But how do you have trusting and reliable agentic AI? As you said, small atomic task, not a big deal. It takes data input, it's got a structured process, it can return it. And honestly, a lot of those can be done with deterministic methods. I don't know that you're going to want to wait for that to go into the context window for an LLM and build in a process. A lot of those simple tasks can be done even with traditional deterministic models. But for larger, more complex processes, there's going to have to be a structure or a framework that's hybrid, where you're using traditional deterministic AI technologies and processes along with the new Gen AI stuff. So you can trust it living in its node, so to speak. Hey, I'm isolated around this. I have a fact base here. I can go send that off and trust the LLM's going to understand that fully. Now I'm going to control the step to the next stage, because in a deterministic way, I can control a variable's state and now feed this to the LLM again and say, this is trusted data, give me an answer based on this trusted data. But once again, thinking it could traverse that whole thing, this comes back to something called chain of thought reasoning, right? If you've ever typed into these LLMs and say, it says thinking, and it goes through its question. But what the research is showing is if it can't handle, at least at a decent level, at a base question, that it breaks down once it starts going through chain of. So chain of thought doesn't fix a broken initial thing. I think there was a hope. There was the hope that chain of thought is just going to fix everything. It's going to solve this problem. But if the model can't handle it to start with, it just kind of gets worse.
I think your view of the world as somebody who thinks a lot about project management would translate really well into giving some guidance on solution providers and IT service providers that are thinking about workflow automation.
Yes.
So give a little bit of sense of you probably have started to develop some best practices around the kinds of things that make sense and where you want to automate more in workflow and where you don't. Can you give us some of your guidelines for the MSPs and IT service providers to apply to their projects?
Yeah, I guess so. As you think about building out templates and process and thinking about the kinds of products and services you're doing today, but what you want to be doing in the future, right? Because there are going to be things, and I think we're learning and seeing from a lot of vendors, there's going to be a lot more automation, a lot more AI that's going to reduce the cost and improve margins for them to track on that. But there are going to be certain processes that, because the MSP and MSSP world is a relationship business, you're going to want or require human interaction around. And so as you build out these projects and templates, doing that with a mindset around, hey, which of these pieces do I believe can be automated, want to be automated, and how do I notify the human when the automation part is done, so they can handle it, like you said, workflow automation, and also understanding how do I customize these, right? That's one of the big problems a lot around this is you could have a template, but that gets varied for many cases for customers every time. Some of them are, hey, it's the same every single time. We want to improve our efficiencies and our margins around this. But there are others where that template is kind of you're using multiple templates to kind of Frankenstein a project together for every customer. So that's the other piece of advice I would give too, is to think about building out template infrastructures, not in a one size fits all, but almost like Lego blocks. I know that we've got to do this for this particular function and service, this, or it could be any one of these. And so I know that when we go to price and build this, I can grab these different Lego blocks and build together something. So now you've got optimized Lego blocks, right? Maybe none of the projects are all exactly the same, but now you can measure the performance of the Lego blocks, if that makes sense.
It does. Now, I'm going to ask, because I'm not sure if it does or not, is this what an orchestration layer is also going to add on top of that, is making the ability to use those blocks, or am I misinterpreting the thinking?
So talk to me about what you mean by an orchestration layer.
I'm intentionally a little broad there, because I'm not exactly, I'm thinking through the idea here. I've been seeing, if you're putting together the components, can you build intelligence that actually recognizes, hey, I need these blocks in these scenarios, I need these other blocks in these other scenarios. Are we there with the level of sophistication we're talking about with the models that we can use?
You can, and it's just a question of error rates, right? Okay. So this becomes to an issue of what's an acceptable error rate. So if the user goes in and says, I want you to make a suggestion based on these words, and you've done and set up a RAG process around that and can say, hey, look, I want these keywords associated with these pieces and components, make a suggestion. As long as they're not going, hey, I'm just going to allow a free text entry, it's going to build a project, I'm going to trust that that project is accurate and the resources are accurate, right? Because once again, the acceptance for error rate on that is lower than I think people realize, right? Because it's not a one-off kind of thing. So I think that'll evolve. Like I said, I think the more effectively sort of traditional deterministic is integrated with the LLMs, there's going to be a much better error rate. And sort of what we'll talk about, supervised automation, right? Hey, this can happen faster. I just kind of want to observe it. I think that partners are going to, and do today, because we could fully automate updating timelines and schedules and tasks all the time. But in the end, they want to observe that. They want to say, you're telling me it's going to change like this, this, and this. And I just want to glance at it before and click the button. It's great you guys do all that work, but I don't just want it to happen in the background without me looking at it, because that feels dangerous or scary. So I think there's a cultural process where, they're going to do it more and more. And at some point they're going to go, hey, I just log in and I click the button, I click the button, I click the button. It's kind of never wrong. We're not there. I don't think anyone feels like we're there yet in a lot of these areas. How long is that going to take? I don't know. I mean, I'd be interested in your wager on how long you think that's going to...
Way longer than guys like me generally guess.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of hype. A lot of the people that are talking about it are financially motivated to make you think it's very fast.
Yes.
And thus, I'm very skeptical of it that happening, which actually almost leads to the question I wanted to ask you to wrap up our time. You've been now spending a lot of time in the managed services space, the IT services space, enough that you are understand it, right?
Yeah.
Anybody who's spent enough time go I have enough customers, I have enough feedback to actually now understand this. I'd like to get your sense of how much of a disruption moment you think this is right now. If you think about what managed services providers are delivering and the way they're engaging and this influx of new capabilities. Is this highly urgent, it's all happening? Is this a period of transition that's going to be the next year? Are we actually looking at a 5-year? Give me a little bit of sense of the way you're looking at kind of the state of play right now.
Yeah. So I think what we see, and we have customers across the spectrum, we maybe don't have the really small, we have maybe 10, 20 as employees, sort of maybe the lower end, and then we go all the way up to the largest players. Certainly the largest players right now are looking aggressively into this and configuring their organizations around this to understand how they can improve margins, process, and efficiencies around this. They also have the luxury and capability, either through acquisition or hiring, to build capabilities and competencies around delivering AI services. I think there's going to be a point quickly where there's an expectation from the customers in the market. I think the smaller mid-sized vendors probably need to be a little more aggressive about contextualizing, hey, we can't just be offering Copilot licenses. We have to be able to engage in an articulate way around that. What are the suite and product services? an MSP that's not heavily into cyber can't overnight all of a sudden become cyber whizzes, right? I mean, there's a skill set and a process execution, liability, like there's just things that they have to relate to. It's the same in AI, and there's got to be some level of building an AI center of excellence within their organization that they go, hey, we got to be on this journey. Because if we're not, then I think that gets turned quickly in a couple of years. And for those who didn't do it, their customers are going to be going, hey, I know we have to do this, and you're not coming to me with anything. But these other three MSPs are, and I kind of need those things, so we might be switching. So I think, to me, that's sort of what's going to happen. The bigger players are going to do it because they have to, and they have the capital to do it. But I think it'll be interesting for me to watch what percentage of the SMB component of that is going to say, hey, we're seeing it already. Some of them get aggressive, and they're hobbyists in process, but did I answer your question?
You did. And actually, you've almost you set me up for the follow-up question. Mike, I always appreciate talking to you because you give me some really good insights into the challenges of these technologies. So I appreciate you spending some time with me.
Yeah, thanks so much.
And thanks for joining me for this bonus episode of The Business of Tech.
The Business of Tech is written and produced by me, Dave Sobel, under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you've subscribed or followed on your favorite platform. It's free and helps directly. Give us a review, too. If you want to support the show, visit patreon.com/MSP Radio, and you'll get access to content early. Or buy our Why Do We Care merch at businessof.tech. Have a question you want answered? We take listener questions, send them in, ideally as a voice memo or video to question@mspradio.com. I answer listener questions live on our Wednesday live show on YouTube and LinkedIn. If you've got a comment or a thought on a story, put it in the comments if you're on YouTube, or reach out on LinkedIn if you're listening to the podcast. And if you want to advertise on the show, visit mspradio.com/engage. Once again, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you again on our next episode.
Part of the MSP Radio Network.